Well, 2022 can be described as difficult for a lot of businesses out there. Well, some would say that expression or word might be an understatement in terms of how things have transpired for a lot of enterprises and firms out there and even individuals. That is why we here at Joy Business are doing a review of 2022 in terms of our business review. How did 2022 fare for you as a businessman and as an enterprise? And what were some of the top issues in 2022? And whether that development or that action or issues shape things going into 2023. I'll be doing this with a team of businessmen, economists, analysts, and investment person here at Joy Business on Joy News and also live on radio on Joy 99.7 FM. My name is Wiafe. Today, it's Business Review 2022. And also, you can also join us in this conversation as we look at some of the top issues that affected you as a businessman and what can be done to ensure that going into next year, things are done well. Professor Peter Korte, he is an economist. He'll be joining me for this discussion. And also, Dr. Sam Ankra, he's president of the African Investment Group. He is a businessman. As a businessman, how was 2022? And also, Michael Kobler, he is the executive director of Synergy Ghana and also an investment person as well. We'll talk about investment and what has happened this year, how things shape up going into next year. And also, Magbedu Abuaji is chief executive of the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, as you look at industry, businesses, and the private sector. Well, all these issues wrapped up here in our special edition of 2022 review. We take a short break and we'll be right back as we broadcast live on radio, Joy 99.7 and on Joy News. Welcome back to Business 2022 as we review the top developments for this year and how they affected enterprises out there. This program is live on Joy 99.7 FM and also on Joy News and all our social media platforms. And also you, the individual out there, you can participate via our WhatsApp lines in terms of comments, how 2022 was for you and whether you're looking forward to an interesting year, a challenging one or not. So let's engage the businessmen themselves. How would they describe 2022 and some of the top issues first? That is Mr. Magbedu Abuaji, Chief Executive of the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Peter Korte, he is an economist and the Executive Director of the Institute of Social Statistical Research, ISE, and also Mike Kobler, he's Executive Director of Synergy Ghana, an investment and advisory firm out there doing some great work. And also, how can I forget Dr. Ken Ashibe? He's Chief Executive of the Chamber of Telecoms. And Dr. Sam Ankra, Chief Executive of the African Investment Group, is also be joining us in this discussion. But let's quickly look at first some of the top issues that happened in 2022. And let me start first at Magbedu Abuaji, representing industry, commerce, and the private sector as well. And obviously, we can't forget about e-levy, right? Interesting.
Of course, e-levy came as a challenge. I mean, initially, we expressed our concern about the rate. And I think something has been done in the last budget. Because e-levy, people always have an option either to use or not to use it. If you have a product that people can have an option, there's a substitute. And that substitute is preferable to what you have. Everybody will go towards that direction. And that's the main reason why they could not raise the necessary revenue that they were expecting. And of course, they're listening to us. But I think we are still hoping that in the subsequent years, they will reduce the rate as well.
And e-levy taught me something. I thought way back in school when they say a product is seen as inelastic, cannot do anything about it. But people found a way to bypass some of these things, and it demonstrated in the revenue that we raised for last year.
For me, that is the challenge that we are going to have in 2023, even though they have reduced the rate.
Yeah.
People are now, they have experience on how to just bypass the e-levy and not to pay. So next year, even though they may be expecting revenue, people will now have a way, because they know how to do it, and they will bypass it and not pay the e-levy. So if they had listened to us earlier, probably all these things wouldn't have happened, and people will now be committed towards paying the e-levy. I mean, we need the revenue, but don't bring in a levy that will be counterproductive, a levy that will affect businesses and the ordinary Ghanaian. They have listened to us. Let's see how it goes for 2023.
I'll come back to you and find out also whether you think that when it comes to revenue mobilization, government has learned this lesson, because we're seeing some semblance of an e-levy in terms of the approach in the 2023 budget. And I'll be coming back to get your thought. Let me go to Zoom and talk to Professor Peter Kote as well. And before I even get to your pick for this year, let's first get your thoughts on e-levy and with all the concerns that were expressed and how things was handled as one of the top issues for this year when it comes to the broader economy.
Viewers, and good afternoon, honorable panel members. E-levy is a product. I can link or describe that or compare that to a soft drink. You could have Coca-Cola, you could have Fanta, you could have malt. So if you want to tax one of them, you ought to be very careful, because this a product has substitutes. If the demand for such a product is inelastic, what it means is that as soon as you change the price, people will react and can use the substitute. So what we are seeing with e-levy is that others could decide to use cash. They could decide to go to the bank and pay. If I owe you, I could decide to use other means of payment. And now even they are circumventing the system where there's cash out. Cash out is free. So there's what they call cash out. I go to the agent and tell them I want to do cash out, to transfer the money to the agent. Then I take the money. I don't pay e-levy. So you see, if you have set the price very low, it's a product that we need, and therefore you would like to use the service. But I mean, if the price is low, you will complain a bit, but the benefit far outweigh the cost, and that would make people continue to use the service. Unfortunately, we peg the price at 1.5%, which is very punitive in my view, and you will not raise the revenue. I mean, no economist or any analyst will advise you to peg a rate at that level if you really want to raise revenue from e-levy.
Prof, certain things have happened in the economy this year that, again, goes back. I know that these theories are not cast in stone and all the rest. And I'll start with e-levy first, because we are told that when the people cannot do with a good or certain tax measures, it is hard to evade it. That has happened. You look at even with this issue about government bonds being risk-free, and look at what is happening. In the lecture rooms, Prof, you taught your students, you told us about how some of these things and these theories, now happenings right now, are raising questions about some of these theories.
Yeah, I mean, when we make such statements or theories or predictions, the economists always say all things being equal, holding everything constant. Nobody anticipated that we're going to have COVID. Nobody anticipated Russia and Ukraine are going to fight, and so on and so forth. So there are things that you would hold constant. We agreed to hold this meeting. We're holding constant, maybe power outage or equipment failure. So there are certain things you cannot predict, and that we ought to make that known. So yes, government bond, government securities are relatively risk-free. If anything will suffer, it is the others. So even now that we are suffering, we're told there's going to be haircut. Treasury bills will not suffer any haircut. Even the bonds, individual bondholders will suffer a haircut on interest. But those who have invested in private equity, private funds, mutual funds, etc., where there is mark-to-market value, some have lost as much as 50%, 40%, 30%. So relatively, one can say that government bonds or government securities are risk-free. The level of risk, because government is in continuity. Government will come, government will go, and therefore the risk of default is very, very minimal compared to if you were to invest in any of the mutual funds or any other forms of investment where they will mark to market value and you lose so much. So that's basically what I can tell you, that there's nothing in this world that is totally risk-free. Some level of risk will be there. If you buy land, chances are that you may lose your land to a land guard or something. If you invest in other products, chances are that you may lose part of your money. If you invest your money in a safe at home, chances are that one day it will be fire or armed robbers will come and take your money away. So there is no investment that is totally risk-free, but the level of risk varies according to who you are investing with, according to the returns as well, depending on the returns as well. The higher the returns, the higher the risk.
And so, Prof, on the lighter note, I mean, would you be revising your lecture notes when you go to lecture and you try to convince students that these are the safest government papers to invest in?
Well, certainly, I think we ought to make the point that in as much as we say it is risk-free, we don't mean it is totally risk-free. There may be an element of risk one day, and we ought to be very minded about that.
If you've just joined us, this is the 2022 Business Review, reviewing some of the top development in 2022 and also moving to 2023. What are the likely things that we should be looking forward to? This program is live on Joy 99.7 FM and also on Joy News and live on all our social media platforms. As we move on, I'll be inviting your comments via our WhatsApp lines. And what are some of the issues that affected you as a businessman and looking forward to 2023? What you be looking forward to? Let me bring in Mike Kobler. He's a executive director of Synergy Ghana. He's an investment person as well. So, Mike, for you, what is the top issue for you this year? Mike, if you can unmute. Yes, Mike.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, Mike, I can hear you. Looking at your top issue or your top pick for 2022, Mike.
Well, I'll say that 2022 was a turbulent year. A number of things, just that we thought that we're coming out of COVID and the global economy was bouncing back. We had the Russia-Ukraine war coming in. Seriously, the economy, together with policies that we were not very sure about, that were kicked in, caused significant challenges for the market. I mean, there were very few restructuring opportunities. There were very few corporate fundraising. It was very difficult to attract investment into the country. So business was tough. Business was very, very tough for us.
And for you, do you think that what has happened this year again could linger on going into next year?
Yes, we can be. This year, next year is going to be significantly very difficult as well. Looking at where we are today, because the global market is shut towards Ghana, and investors are very shy to bring money into the economy. People are going to still wait and see how the IMF discussions and final conclusions are going to pan out. It's going to be very, very difficult, but we are hopeful that once the IMF its program is finally concluded and the uncertainties that has bedeviled the whole country now is quite setting, things will begin to evolve. On an individual level, for individuals who have bought these government bonds who are not going to get any payments for next year, it's going to have significant list of people. There are pensioners who all that they do are buying drugs and using these returns from investments to cushion themselves in retirement. I sit on the university that about a third of its budget is financed through the returns that we get from bonds. And if we are not going to get any return, we expect that next year will be quite challenging as well.
Okay, I'll let you go too much into next year because we'll be moving into that separate session to look at the threats going into next year and all those things. But let me bring in, that is Ken Ashibe, Chief Executive of the Telecoms Chamber. For you, e-levy will be a big issue for you. Am I right or I'm wrong?
Well, definitely, George, and good afternoon to our audience and our panel. Definitely, yes, 2022 is a difficult year. We started the e-levy conversation from 2021 into 2022. A lot of the things that we had said, if we had listened, would have been in a better place. So the 6.9 billion did not happen. I'm not too sure the revised target would be met. The e-levy itself has impacted, apart from the challenges that we saw in the third quarter, the turbulence in the market. The e-levy also had a major impact on the digital economy. A lot of investments, fintechs had various investment conversations that because of the e-levy itself did not materialize. And what is happening is that it's not only government that did not make its revenue. The revenues of most of these EMIs and other fintechs also were impacted, which means that with the inflationary pressures that we saw, cost also ballooning, what is going to happen is that most of these businesses might not make the profits that we saw in the prior year, which would then mean that even government's own CIT that they'll be expecting, that would also be impacted as well. And so it's generally been a very difficult year for all of us, both corporates and individuals. And in the telecom sector, definitely it was a difficult year. And so towards you saw that it's one of the industries where the inflationary pressures that we saw, we didn't see the prices of telecom services going up that much. I think it was towards the end of the year that some of the networks were beginning to respond to the challenges that had happened. Utility prices had gone up, fuel prices had gone up, which was all impacting on the provision of telecommunication services. And so then it's definitely going to have a ripple effect on the cost of telecom services, which then would also have impact on other businesses that depend on telecommunication services. So yes, it's really been a difficult year, and the 1% reduction still does not do it. We were hoping that government would have listened to putting a cap on the e-levy as well. So what you saw in 2022 was that volumes dropped, but it did not drop as much as values did. Because for those who send high values, you know that the industry itself is structured in such a way that when you send money beyond a particular limit, for Vodafone, there's no charge. But for MTN, Airtel, Z-Pay, G-Money, when you send above 1,000 CDs, you just pay 7.5. But then if it's even you're saying 5,000, you pay 7.5. But then you'll be paying 75 CDs. And as has been said, there are alternatives. And not only were there alternatives of cash, but the e-levy itself was very discriminatory against a particular channel. So you had a waiver of 100 CDs for mobile money, but then you had 20,000 for the banks. And then if you were a corporate and you were sending, you decided to pay salaries of your staff using mobile money, you were charged the e-levy. But then if you decided to use the banks, there was no levy on it. So that discrimination also moved a lot of the transactions from mobile money to the banks, and also inconvenienced those who are at the bottom of the pyramid. It's good that government, in revising and in reviewing the law, decided, took the counsel of all of us to not take away the daily thresholds as well. So these were the difficulties that industry, the economy imposed on industry, and also impacted on consumers as well.
Dr. Shigbe, what do you tell those who might argue that, listen, government was struggling to raise the revenue, there were concerns about the policy, the approach, but maybe the operators themselves could have helped government out in blocking some of these loopholes and you've not been that helpful. Are they right with
Oh,
those concerns?
We've been very helpful.
You didn't like the tax, so of course, let's allow people to evade.
No, not at all. So you saw that the industry itself, because we anticipated the negative impact it was going to have on consumers, two of the EMIs reduced their charges from the 1% to 0.75%. So that definitely was an input that we did. And then what we definitely put signals out against ways in which people should not be doing their transactions. That when you go out, instead of sending the money from your device, you go and give it to an agent to do for you. What you are endangering yourself, because if that money does not go, there will be nobody that you would hold responsible. So all of these were things that we did. But see, the important thing that we keep on saying as an industry is that yes, there's a shift towards the digital economy. And so what is important that we do is that how do we leverage on the digital economy to raise revenues for government? But it is not, the way to go is not to tax the digital instruments that are being used. And so, there are various things that we can do to see how we're able to leverage on the digital economy. Before we started this e-levy, there were engagement between the chamber and the GRA and our members as how to see how we tax, the e-commerce market. Were conversations about, players that were not within, our jurisdiction. How do they also, but, who do business digitally? So the likes of Facebook, the like of Google. How do we have conversations with them so that they also are able to pay some bits based on the digital economy that they're engaged in? These are the things that we need to do, and we need to deepen in the way as to ensure that we are able to leverage on the digital economy to be able to raise revenue for government. But it is not, to tax the instrument, the digital instrument that you're using to facilitate business.
When you come to the studio, Magbedu Abuaji, Chief Executive of the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, do you think that government has learned this lesson when it comes to using the e-levy as an example, and i.e. its revenue mobilization going forward? Because, it did cut across, if it was just, and sorry to use this expression, that the opposition was just coming for maybe the minority in parliament, you would have described that as political. Businesses, academia, the chamber, government says, so we've done our research and all the rest. We are seeing semblance of some of these things in the budget as to other tax handles and policy measures.
I personally do not think that they have learned a lot of lessons from the e-levy. When you look at the new VAT that they have introduced, I think there have been similar concerns from other associations and other individuals, just as we express concern about the e-levy. But some way, somehow, they have been able to push it through. Now, I don't think we, as a Ghanaian, individuals and businesses, we are
you don't want to pay taxes.
We are against.
You want to invade. Even the iPhones and the Mark Zuckerbergs and all the rest. They fight governments when they are trying to come after them for taxes. No, and that might be the problem.
Look at government tax component, and look at the contribution of the private sector to this component. You see, any tax that increases the cost of production, any tax that is counterproductive will in the end reduce the profit and also the corporate tax, for me, which is very huge, that will be paid to government.
But corporate tax is a tax on your profit. So if you're making profit, you should pay the tax.
That is so. If you are not making profit, every business will
if you don't make profit, you are not going to pay the tax.
You're not paying it. But it's important that we look at where the incidence of tax is. For me, the incidence of tax should be post-production instead of pre-production. When it's pre-production, it increases the cost of production, and people will make less profit, and therefore will pay less tax, corporate tax. But if you do it in such a way that pre-production, people have less tax to pay, and then they can produce and expand, absorb more people, then they will get a higher profit and they will pay more. The structure of this tax is an issue. Now, this is a tax that becomes a cost daily to businesses. Unlike the other VAT, where there's an input-output, so you pay and you can make a claim, and of course will not affect your cost of production. This component is just going to increase your cost of production. Now, the VAT alone, putting together NHIL and all those things, is about 22%. And it's about the highest in the whole continent. Now, how do we become competitive? Just tax alone, VAT and other levies, is about 22%. So businesses definitely are not against it, but the structure is what we are talking about. Now, if you look at a typical business, this tax also affects the consumption pattern of individuals. So the revenue that are supposed to come in will not come in. Now, if I'm going to buy a product and there is an option that if I buy this particular product, I'm going to pay this tax of 22%, but there's an option that I will not pay the tax. I will opt for that option if they can give me the same kind of satisfaction.
Do you think that that approach of giving option was its downfall in terms of the success of this tax?
Exactly, just like e-levy. If there is an option, if there is a substitute for any product, individuals are rational, businesses are rational. They will look for the product that they will pay less tax on it. So you may estimate that you are going to get such and such revenue out of this tax, but in the end, you may not get. And the effect of it will be very, very dark for us as a nation, just as we suffered that of the e-levy. The 6 billion that they were expecting, they got less than 10%. And that is one of the main reasons why we are going through all this debt structuring and all those, because the revenue that we were expecting to pay for our debt, we couldn't get it because of the structure. And because they also didn't listen to us.
And you think that government hasn't learned its lesson, because it looks like it's a merry-go-round, and that same challenge will come back to it as again.
Yes, so we are waiting to see what will happen there at the end of 2023. Because at least for now, as we have said, if they had listened to us when the e-levy was introduced, the concerns we raised, and they had reduced it to less than 1%, now probably they would have increased their revenue that would have gotten from e-levy. Yeah. This tax, we have asked that they should reduce it. They did not listen. Businesses are rational, individuals.
And even it took them, and I stand to be corrected that it took the minority in parliament to still push for that cap or that exemption to be given to that 100 cities. Yes. I stand to be educated, my producers.
Yes.
So it appears the government is still bent on doing this without the stakeholder input and all the rest. What has been the industry challenge? I remember Professor Alina raised concerns about doing marriage counseling after marriage. What is the level of engagement between the business community and government when it comes to the preparation of the budget?
For me, I think some of the engagement that we've done with them, I think most of the time, those inputs that we make are not taken into consideration. When we had a meeting with them, they said they cannot introduce all the things that we have asked them to do. So they will stagger it. They will do some this year, some next year, and others in the subsequent years. Because from the beginning of the budget processing, they asked us to submit our input. And one of the things we asked for is that looking at challenges that we are facing as businesses, the last thing they will do is to introduce any new tax or increase the existing one. We asked that they should be efficient in the collection of taxes. Now, if they are doing that, like the e-VAT and all those things, they have introduced it and they are implementing it very well, there would not be any need for us to increase any VAT or introduce a new one. So we have asked and we said it right from day one that they should not. But they didn't listen to us, and they have introduced a VAT which is way above comprehension, because now, if you add, as I said, it's about 22%. So sometimes we had engagement with them, but as to whether they take what we present to them is also a different thing. That is how duty bearers are. Usually they take a position, and then they just sometimes call you to come and do a presentation. For me, that is not fair. We are from the business, we are from the private sector. We have challenges, and we have presented such an issue to you. The only thing you could do is to also engage us further and explain your point to us. So sometimes you just do a presentation, they say, okay, we'll consider it, and that will be what. The next day, they read the budget, and all the things that you have asked that they should not introduce, they have. And the things that you want them to introduce to help businesses, they don't do it. So I think that we need to look at our engagement level, and that comes with this debt restructuring. If they had really engaged, just as other countries did, they really engaged, set up committees to engage the creditors on how they are going to structure this debt. People will now buy into it. If they have any concerns, they raise it before you even come out. But you leave it open, and then you impose your own ideas, your own debt restructuring on people. definitely they will oppose it.
I'll be coming back because that is one issue that will be rounding up for this year, and as we also move into next year. If you have just joined us, this is a 2022 Joy Business Review as we look at some of the top issues for this year, and we'll move into next year to do our outlook for 2023. This program is live on Joy 99.7 FM and also on Joy News and all our social media platforms. We'll also be taking your views and comments via WhatsApp on some of the top issues in this year and what lessons have you learned as a business person. Let me bring in Professor Peter Korte on using e-levy as, the standard or the benchmark. How can we ensure that we get the tax modeling right and revenue modeling right? Because the argument that we're told previously was that if we could have raised the revenue off from e-levy, there wouldn't have been an IMF program. Which some would disagree that the problem with the economy is not just about revenue.
George, our problem in this country is that our policies are not backed by research. There is no research backing any of the policies we introduce in our budget. For any serious country, every serious country takes research seriously.
But Prof, sorry to cut in, but that is serious. There's supposed to be a tax policy division at the Ministry of Finance.
Well, that's why if there has been a serious research backing e-levy, we wouldn't have been where we are currently. If there's, and I'm yet to see that research. I am yet to see this on the Ministry of Finance website. I'm yet to see it being shared with anybody. Any policy you introduce should be backed by research. And I can tell you that in the past, we have seen the Ministry of Finance advertise, get consultants, financial literacy, many other things. They get consultants, be it international consultants, local consultants, and they come out with a position paper. I remember there was a case where we were even looking at capping interest rate with the Ministry of Trade and Industry. So when you do all this background research, and then you are sure, you do your consultations and you are sure, then you come out. Unfortunately, just like my friend Ali Nachia said, we marry before we go for the marriage counseling. So you would then come with a policy, then realize it's going to fail, then you go around doing these town hall meetings. I don't think that is right. Let us back everything with policy, with research, every policy with research. VAT. There are many countries whose VAT rates are low. There are also those whose VAT rates are high. Gabon is 18%, Botswana is 12%, Denmark is 19.25%. I can go on and on. Nigeria is 7.5%, Malawi 16.5%, South Africa is 15%. So the VAT rates are there, but we seem to be in the very high bracket. There are some levies that are also VAT. So why don't you add to the VAT and apply the VAT rate so that industry can apply for input tax, etc. So when you do all these simulations, macro simulations, background studies, etc., that will inform policy. Unfortunately, we are not doing a lot of that. We don't invest much into research, and it cuts across many African countries. We try and error. We try, it fails. We try something else, it fails, and that is what is not helping us. I must say. So going forward, I would urge government to take research seriously and back most of these new policies with research. A lot of consultations are important. Then you can work on your figures and be very certain that if there's going to be any deviation at all, it will be very marginal, maybe plus or minus 5%. Not what we saw with e-levy.
Let me bring in my cobbler, and then as we try and wrap up on 2022, because we're doing a lot as in doing the forecast to 2023 as well. Inflation, I know, and some of the numbers that we're seeing right now, we are reading them in textbooks and all the rest. For you, it was a big challenge for you operating in the investment space, right?
Yes, absolutely. On what basis do you convince people to invest? When this is about 50%, and your currency depreciated by 53.8%. In real terms, your real income is eroded, and it's no it's not surprising that Labour was agitating for more salaries because it was really painful. I mean, so if you have an economy where your real return is gone, I mean, and we keep telling Ghanaians, we keep telling people that they should not be buying foreign currency, stop speculating. But look, seriously, you lost 53.8%, I mean, of the value of your currency. I mean, so it's really, really tough. I mean, and no wonder we have a lot of capital flight, which also has an implication on our currency, because then when foreign investors start cashing out and taking their money out, it is dollars that will transfer, they will not transfer cedis. I mean, so that puts additional pressure on your currency. So actually, Ghana attracting investors into the country became a real challenge, I mean, during the course of the year.
But Mike, again, let me quickly get your thought on this cedi depreciation, since you brought it up in your discussion as well. I mean, I mean, an accountant, a finance investment person, how can we get around this cedi depreciation challenge? Because, I mean, even the dollar depreciates, but sometimes the margin of depreciation is huge. How can we slow the rate of depreciation for our local currency?
George, you have to go back to the fundamentals. I mean, it's demand and supply. It's not rocket science. You know, I mean, the moment there is a situation where you have more people demanding more dollar than the cedi, it will depreciate.
But why are they depreciating more dollars? And Mike, let me come in. Why are they demanding more dollars? Some are saying that if you stabilize your local currency, that is the best shot for dealing with the city's depreciation. People would not gravitate.
How do we stabilize the currency when we are importing so much, George? And we have all these policy initiatives, like Professor Kote said. I mean, we come up with a lot of policy without being backed by research. Okay, now we are doing food for planting and jobs. So why should we be importing tomatoes and onions? We even importing katiki into this country. Really?
Oh, really?
I mean, yes.
In katiki?
Go to the shops. You see katiki.
Important.
In the supermarket.
Interesting.
Yes, katiki. Katiki, that when we were growing up, it was on the street everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, that we were buying, on the streets and chewing katiki. Now importing katiki into the country. Okay, so if we don't have policies that ensure that I have people who have invested in poultry farms. There were times in this country where they couldn't even get corn to feed the chickens. Okay, and some of these poultry farms were producing about maybe 1,000 crates of egg a day. So can you imagine these people going out of business? They were not getting the feed to feed the chickens, so they stopped the farming. We will now start importing eggs. I mean, so we are not intentional about anything that we do in this country. I don't know why we cannot get one thing right. One thing, just one thing.
Interesting, Mike. Let me bring in Dr. Samankra, President of the African Investment Group. Doc, how are you doing? And thank you for joining us. We're initially having some challenges connecting. But for you, as a businessman operating in the commodity investment space and all the rest, how would you describe 2022? Doc, can you please unmute your Zoom so we can hear you, please?
Well, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, Doc. Thank you for joining us. And I was asking you as a businessman, how would you describe this year?
Well, I mean, after the COVID-19 lockdown abated in early 21, a sharp economic recovery was positive in the short term, but soon led to the overheating of the global economy. Then we have the Russia invasion of Ukraine, which drove commodity price shocks and energy crisis in Europe. These factors, combined with supply chain disruptions, caused broad volatility in the financial markets, supported by strong demand for commodities, and China still being under COVID lockdown. We realized that inflation was about 40-year high. Central banks rapidly tightened monetary policies, creating a backdrop that has required markets to digest substantial increase in the cost of capital. The global market due value went down by 45%, and there was capital market volatility, significant challenges on assessing debt for medium to large transactions, all contributed hugely to the global economic downturn. And Ghana, of course, not being an exception. We're in a global village, as you know, and Ghana is not an island. And I wish to state here that although we could have safeguarded ourselves and isolate ourselves from some of these shocks, but unfortunately, our poor economic fundamentals, coupled with a very weak investor sentiments, expose us to a record fall and depreciation of our currency, of which we've never experienced before. So which seriously affected the private sector, which we fall within. We saw very high inflation, as you could see. There was high rising interest rates. Businesses could not borrow at the rates that the banks were offering. There were even challenges with liquidity, and the deterioration of the physical space and external accounts of government obviously did not help. So if you ask me a summary of what happened in 2022, that's exactly what I've said to you, I've just narrated. It was a serious shock to businesses. So many companies have closed down. Others converted their investments into cash and fly out of the country. And basically, a lot needs to be done to recover these holes that have been created going forward to see any sort of stability in 2023.
How are you dealing with Doc? I mean, you are investment, you are into commodity trading and all the rest. How are you dealing with the FX losses and the borrowings that you've done? Because I believe that these commercial banks, they are not for the Christmas. They'll be coming back for their money with interest.
Well, I mean, a lot of companies are closing shop because of that. Imagine you go and borrow right after COVID at a retail price of, say, 5.3, and then wholesale price, and you retail it at 5.3 just after COVID. And just around September, November, you are looking at 15 cedis to the dollar. No company can repay back their costs. So similar to what government do, if you're lucky, you can enter into some sort of restructuring with these debtors and have some sort of leverage. But as to whether these companies can go back to the market and borrow at all, obviously their market is shut on all of us because government credit is low and it has affected every business in the country. So imagine you are operating in a sector where you borrow so much for externally and your collections cannot pay back, so that puts you into a serious default. And in the local market too, there are serious and huge challenges. So businesses obviously has suffered tremendously, and I believe going forward, and again, if you look at the budget that the government read also, it doesn't give a lot of hope to the businesses. So we need to look into it critically if you really want to revamp this economy. It hinges on the private sector. It's the engine of growth. We can't go with that. We can't go around it. Government needs to start looking at deliberate policies and seeing how best you can get businesses out of these shocks that we've gone through. There's been turbulent times right from 2020 through 2021, 2022, and up to this period. And I believe that for any business-focused government, decision-making has to be made, and we have to bring the brains on the table to deliberate on exactly how we can help first to build investor confidence, revive these broken companies, and see how best we can restructure going forward. But the situation is very gloomy, my friend, and we need to look at it critically.
Doc, I'll be coming back to you as to whether all these things that have happened and how it will impact your optimism going into 2023. And as we try and wrap up on 2022, I mean, I want to just go around with all of you and look at, for you, we've not talking about the IMF because it will dovetail into 2023 and also policy rate and inflation. So we'll move into next year as well to all these things that are happening as well. But let me do a quick round around all of you as you close the chapter on 2022. And also the debt restructure, we'll talk about that going into next year. For you, what were your lows for this year as a businessman, the low, and if there was any high as well?
Well, I think it's been, as has been said, very difficult year.
Any one incident you do
scary,
at your lowest point?
For me, the whole environment was scary because you don't know what is happening the next day. Prices were just going up like that. So as a business person, you wake up and you realize that your cost of production is constantly going up. So all the things that you have mentioned, inflation, policy rate, and all those things, they all feed into the cost of production. And you are not getting people also buying your product because inflation has eaten out their money. So 2022 is a year that for me, I wouldn't want us to revisit because of the nature. In fact, the last time we experienced such economic deterioration was 1983. But that was an accumulation of bad performances within the previous year.
Yes.
This one comes as a shock to everybody, even though there were signs that there were going to be difficulties, not to the magnitude that we are experiencing now. So everything about 2022, when it comes to the cost of production, for me was my lowest side. Within the year.
Any highs or something that got you excited? As
Something got me excited was the recent appreciation of the
strong stability that we see.
Yes, of the CD, and I don't know whether it's sustainable. But for me, when the rate got to 16, and you have anything
Even
to
17
do,
for some
17.
people. Some international card platforms were quoting way higher rates.
I mean, it was scary. If you have a dollar-denominated loan to pay, if you are importing anything, you are paying in dollars, you cannot sleep. So for us to get the CD also putting up that strong performance against the dollar, for me, it gives us some belief that there is hope. But I think we have to do more to ensure that we're able to sustain it. For my highest point for me will be the appreciation of the CD.
This is 2022 Business Review on Joy 99.7 FM on radio and also on TV on Joy News and all our social media platforms. Listen, those who are listening to us on radio, you can participate in this discussion via our WhatsApp line as 055 111 997. As in what's your highs and lows for 2022 and going forward into 2023. Are you excited that maybe there is some optimism based on what government is doing, or still you're still skeptical about things and how things will look? You can drop us a WhatsApp on 055 1111 9977 on your business review here at Joy 99.7 FM. Let me go to that is Ken Ashibe. For you, 2022 was your lowest point, if there was even any highs. Mr. Ken Ashibe, if you're there, trying to get back to you on your lowest point in 2022. Let me come to that is Professor Prof. Your lowest 2022.
My lowest was when we saw the significant depreciation in the CD, as well as the price hikes, and people started hoarding. There was a lot of turbulence, uncertainty. And that reminded me of the late 70s and early 80s. So I said, are we back to those days that we had all the food crisis and many other things where we were queuing for bread, water, and so many other things? And I also found that government communication at the time, when we were going through all of this, telling Ghanaians what is happening, how do we get out of it, was a bit limited in my view, and I thought that also let swell the whole situation. So people fed on noise; they didn't know what was happening. Others were speculating, and that didn't help at all. I was expecting that the way we did so well with COVID, the way we communicated so well when we were under COVID, we should have done the same with our policies as to what we are doing to get out of this situation. But I thought the communication was very limited, and I can't remember the last time I heard a Minister of Communication speak on economic and other issues. But for me, the positive side was that we then saw some relative stability due to many factors. We've heard about the gold for oil imports, which we are likely to witness lower prices at the pumps. We also heard about Bank of Ghana, some of the monetary policies.
But Prof, sorry for a quick rude intervention. This gold for oil, again, the question about sustainability and whether it's something that will really work?
Well, it's a big question. We're yet to know what exactly is happening. But to give us some respite, in a crisis situation, of course, you need to find ways of getting out of the crisis and then plan for long-term sustainability. My concern with that policy is, are we going to give raw gold, or we should rather process gold? Because oil that we're importing is processed oil. They've added value. And we are going to exchange that with raw gold. Is that the case? I think we should, going forward for sustainability, we should think about processing some of our gold so that we don't just send the raw gold, just like we do with our agri products, cocoa in raw state, everything, timber in raw state. We should think about processing so that we add value. And when we are exchanging, we also get better value for our products.
Interesting. And that's for you. What about the highs as well?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the highs are when we've seen some relative stability on the exchange market, and that is also helping price to ease gradually. Also, the announcement that we have signed a staff level agreement with the IMF gives some comfort to many people, and I'm hoping that we'll be successful with the debt exchange program, be able to, somewhere in the first quarter of 2023, be able to sign on to the IMF program, get some funding coming in, get some policy credibility, get some buy-in from the international community, and ensure some macro stability within the system. So hopefully, if we're able to get onto the program, we'll certainly see some improvements in the economy, and in 2023, 2024, things might pick up.
My Kola, 2022, your lowest as an investment person and also Executive Director of Synergy Ghana.
The combination of inflation and depreciation rates were not the best. Those were the lows. I mean, watching people's investments, real income dwindle to that level of proportion was incredible. I mean, the highs for me was being able to finally take a decision to go to IMF, now bleeding state, and being able to reach a staff level agreement within a short time. And so those are my highs and lows for this year.
This is Joy Business Review 2022 is live on Joy 99.7 FM and Joy News and all our social media platform. When we are back, we focus on more on 2023, the debt exchange program, all the challenges, the IMF program, and we'll be listening our listeners or those who are monitoring us on radio, that is Joy 99.7 FM. When we are back, we're still on radio and all our social media platforms. It's our 2022 Business Review. We're back after this break. It's our 2022 Business Review on Joy 99.7 FM and also on Joy News. Our listeners on radio have lost us, but we are still on TV and also on all our various social media platforms as we reviewed 2022 and we move into 2023. What should we be focusing on and what will be the biggest issues for this year as well, and how will that shape businesses and also their development and how they relate with you and all the rest? You can also join us, that is via our WhatsApp line that we've seen on our screens for you to contribute to this program and going into 2023. Let me get onto the Zoom line, and Mike Kopla, if we can get your thoughts in for you on this debt exchange program and for you, the things that we should be looking out for in 2023.
Program is a bit too much. I think the earlier panelists have talked about consultation. I don't know what is difficult about having broad consultation on policy issues. This is a major policy shift. I mean, obviously, nobody anticipated that, even though we keep saying that all things being equal, government paper is risk-free, nobody anticipated this. So if we are in a situation like this, I think that a good thing to do would be to bring everybody together, various groups of people, show the extent of the debt that we have, show the extent of the problem, and then let people come up with various views. Let's work out various scenarios to be able to come up with an optimal solution. Okay, but this thing about saying there will be no haircut, and then there's haircut, there will be no, the pension funds are included, and individual funds will not be included. The next time individuals are included, and it's thinking until we thought when everybody was not watching. I mean, I don't think that is fair to Ghanaians. I think that we should be consistent with our policies. Okay, and going forward, if we don't do this, because you see, we have set the stage or the back to the 80s, where people were putting money under their beds. We have eroded investor confidence completely. People call and they are trying to find out, where can we put our money? Where can we put our money now? Okay, internationally, because of this inconsistency, funds into the country have dried up. Okay, so going forward into 2023, I think that we should broaden the consultation across board, such that when we come up with any policy, people would readily buy into it. Be it labor, be it worker groups, be it investor group, bring everybody on board so that we can all come, because we are already the whole. This is the only country that we have. And the only way we can go forward is to all move in tandem with a policy that everybody is comfortable with. Okay? Because,
and Mike, and you said one thing that I thought was very, very important for me, that over the years, how we've tried very much to inculcate the culture of savings and investment. And just to share one person's example with you, a friend called me complaining bitterly about how, George, over the years, I've tried to buy into the advice of investing. All that I had over the years, university, working, traveling, I've invested it. Now today I'm being told that I can't get some, and that person was actually virtually crying on the phone. And he was mad.
It's not an isolated case, George. Look, we have actually struggled to look at what it took to introduce mutual funds into this economy. It was a lot of hard work. Okay, we've eroded all that confidence, George, as we speak. The banks have about 30% of their assets, okay, locked up in these bonds. Okay, now if they're not going to get a return on it, they will not be able to advance money to the private sector. How do we grow? It is not really wonder that we have revised our growth rate for next year about 2 point something. If we are going to be able to really achieve that, that's going to be a big question. So from where we sit, we think that, look, it doesn't cost anything to consult. It doesn't cost anything. You have everything to gain by consulting, because you waste everybody's time by being inconsistent.
And you think that for us, the door has also been shut in terms of investment as well, because now it'll be struggle going into next year convincing people to invest.
Yeah, money is fungible, and once you get into a situation where we are basically saying that the country is bankrupt. Okay, so if the country itself is bankrupt, how do the individual players, how do the other micro elements in the country attract funding? It's virtually impossible, George. So things have to stabilize first for people to have a clear direction, and we have to be very consistent with our policies. If it is because we are doing all this inconsistency because our policies are not backed by research, as Professor Potter has alluded to, let's do the right thing. It doesn't cost anything to consult. It doesn't cost anything to bring the think tanks to do the research that is required to drive our policy, so that we can have a consistent flow of policy and get for the policy credibility going forward into 2023.
Thank you, Mike. Let me bring in Kanashibe. Inflation, IMF program, debt exchange program. Whichever way you want to look at it, the telcos are affected. Yeah, I'm still having, let me go to, that is Dr. Samankra. And for you, the debt exchange program will still be the big issue for a lot of businesses next year.
Well, George, as the other colleagues have just said, huge problem. What kind of markets are we building? Are we discouraging people from saving and investing their money? Do we have other options that we can look at to save the situation? These are very, very important questions that our leaders or the managers of the economy has to look into. I would say the latter. They need to sit down and have a thorough search into the fiscal space and see where best they can cut expenditures and help with people from having confidence in the investment market, because that's a big problem. Going forward, I'm expecting and I'm looking forward to stability. And again, it's not just stability by words. If the market is not stabilized, whatever we do will be yo-yo, and business cannot plan. As I said to you, the flippage of the currency is a huge problem. It cannot be done overnight, but I'm sure a solid proposal to IMF to back them on a pegging situation for a period, just to bring some sanity into the market. It's something that they should research and look into. Because without stability, all these that we're talking about, the fundamentals cannot be built overnight. It will require a process for us to build a fundamental. So whilst we are looking to close our boundaries for importing so many of these products that we've all talked about, we need that stability. And from my point of view, I believe that if we look at stabilizing it where we can have the currency pegged for at least some years, 5 years even, and then sort out homegrown policies where we raise higher taxes on importation and give tax leeway to local production. Because just saying we're not giving forex to importers to import certain products, that's not solve the problem. It's not a policy. Anybody can get an export credit and come to the market and sell and then buy the dollars from the black market and put a payback after it's been sold. So we need to look critically, well-researched policies, as earlier on said, and then work by it. It's not going to happen overnight. But when the broad picture is laid, when the long-term vision is outlaid before us, I am very sure that people will support and buy into it. But if we keep on doing these ad hoc measures, where we are firefighting, there's this issue here, we tackle it a bit, and again, our lackadaisical approach to expert advice is unbelievable. I mean, you are in a dying situation. You have think tanks, you have academicians, you have people brainstorming and bringing out solid policies and directives that can help. And yet, what do you see? Blind eye. Is it ego? Is it pride? What is it? So we need to look into ourselves carefully as these problems in front of us can be solved. It can only be solved by Ghanaians. Let's sit down. It's our country, it's our economy. Let's collectively come with our ideas and see how best we can get out of this situation. It can't be a one-man agenda. It can't be a one-man band, or what do you call it, as we keep doing. It can't be a one-party situation. It has to be a collective and a sustainable effort by all.
But Doc, so just a quick one on pegging the currency. Some would say that do we really have what it takes? And that maybe the free market approach is what we need right now, because it will come back to bite us when the currency has to correct itself.
Well, like I said, it's not a perpetual situation we're having. We're going to ask IMF, similar to what they propose. I mean, IMF bought into a lot of the local policies that the ministry or the finance team put together. So present a similar proposal, because what the market lacks is stability and confidence. And this is all a market needs. If there's no confidence in your market and your market is not stable, there's nothing you can do. You are yo-yo. Today is that nobody plans. No direct investments. People will take their money out. Ghanaians will rather keep their monies under their mattresses rather than put it into the system. So how do we correct this? How do we build this confidence? And these are structures or policies that have worked before. As we said, the UAE did it. Japan has done it. Almighty China did it at some point. I mean, if you look at the research, lots of countries over the period, through such difficulties, has put up these policy plans and it has worked perfectly. So nothing stops us. Let's forget about all this free market stuff and so forth. It's not like a free market here. We are building our local economy. We have challenges that need to be addressed. And the only way we can address it is if we have some sort of sanity in the market. And this is what is going to bring us the sanity that we need. George.
Margaret, thank you. I'll come back to you. That exchange program, it will still be a big issue for us this year. And just like what the investment persons have said, we are at risk of eroding all the years of hard work various stakeholders have built in investment and in savings.
Yes, of course, it will bring definitely confidence low. The effect is broad-based. It's affecting almost every aspect of the economy. For a typical business person who, for one reason or the other, has invested in bonds, just for him to get the money to plow back into his business, now you are saying that he's not going to get it until 10 years or so. I mean, it's eventually saying that collapse your business. And the only option out of this for the business is go to the bank for money. The banks are also suffering.
Yeah.
And if they are ready even to give you money, you are borrowing at a rate that is so exorbitant that you can't even think about it. So the effect for me is going to be there for everybody. And the approach to which they have handled all these things, I sit back and I wonder whether we just sleep and come out and come and do some of these things. The consultation was basically very poor. Today is like this, tomorrow is like this. When you do that, the confidence is not there. And now it's going to affect savings, it's going to affect investment in the economy. If anybody has money and said, I want to invest, the question is, where do I even invest this money? If I'm a foreigner and I want to, now that we need the dollar, we are not going to get it because people will now sit back and then also measure the risk that they are putting in their money. Even the ones that they have, they say you are not going to get the interest over a period of time. So the debt exchange is if you're able to do it well, I mean, it's one of the conditions set out under the IMF, and we need the money from the IMF. That is the only way out of this difficulty. If you don't get it, the economy, the level that you will get to is
Do you think that it could have been handled better? And also to get back to the point that this debt exchange program, it has serious implications as well in terms of even access to credit, because for most of the banks that will be hit, they will be looking at balancing their books than being aggressive when it comes to credit extension.
Yes, of course. I mean, 50% of the entire debt is being held by the banks. So if they don't have the money, how do they even give credit to businesses? So next year, I mean, if you don't handle it, it's going to be a difficult situation for business. The monies will not be there, and the ones that are there, you cannot even borrow. But I think that we should do a lot of consultation. Everybody in Ghana, we all know the situation that we find ourselves. We want, one way or the other, trying to help all of us come out of this bad situation. But you don't impose certain conditions on people that will affect their activities like what we are having. When you do that, the people will fight back. The labor unions, they fought back. They've been able to achieve something. Yeah. The banks, some way, somehow, because the regulator is also some way managing the situation, they are trying to find a way out of this. The stabilization fund that they have established, I don't know to what extent it's going to help in resolving this particular issue. So credit for private sector, definitely in 2023, is going to be affected. And that will definitely affect the activities of businesses.
Professor Peter Korte, I mean, could this debt exchange program be handled better than what we are seeing? Because if I read several analyses and projections and all the rest, apart from those who are in the managerial space of the economy, the comments don't look good.
Yes, I think that's one condition or conditionality we needed to meet to sign on to the program. However, we could have communicated, engaged better to see some of the challenges. Perhaps if we had done so, labor unions would not have opted out. And now we find ourselves in this situation. We have to bring in individual bondholders. And that is very, very sharp in the sense that we have individual bondholders who rely on the interest income to buy medication. Some are quite a number of pensioners who use this to buy medication. Yesterday I met somebody who had invested so much in bonds and he lives on that for his blood pressure medication. Now he's told he cannot get his money, he cannot get interest payment. So it has repercussions on livelihood, on people's health, etc. In the 80s, when we did the structural adjustment program, there was what we call PAMS card program to mitigate the social cost of adjustment. Yes. You see, this time round, if you are touching individual bondholders, there's nothing. The banks, there's a stabilization fund. What about the individuals, the pensioner, the poor, the many people who have bought private bonds, those who have bought this unit trust and all that? What happens to them? Is there anything to mitigate the cost of adjustment, the cost of this policy? We are not told. I think we need a communication plan. In a crisis situation, you need a crisis communication plan. If you have that plan, you know who to engage. As soon as it happens, who do I engage? At what point? what to do. We need to deploy and have that plan and deploy as and when crisis arises. Unfortunately, we have not done that. What is happening with the debt exchange is going to affect confidence in the banking system. In the 70s and 80s, when government said those with 50 CD notes to bring to the banks and there were interference in the banking system, a lot of people kept their monies at home, and the banking system actually suffered. We are going back to those days. Now people don't know where to invest their money. I meet several people asking me, now, what is safe to invest my money? Where do I go? I think we ought to be careful with this debt exchange program. That is the way out of the where we find ourselves to get onto an IMF program. However, we ought to be cautious so that the vulnerable, the excluded, who have saved a little money to live on, will not be affected significantly. George, let me also add quickly that going to 2023, we ought to look at credible or realistic revenue targets. We said we are going to raise revenue by 46.8%. And equally, we are going to increase expenditure by 39.5%. What this means is that we are not doing much to cut down on our deficit. The question I also ask is, how credible are these estimates? When in our history have we been able to increase revenue by 46%? I think we ought to be more careful with our estimates so that credibility, policy credibility, is always established. Otherwise, we'll be having challenges with our projections and people will continue to fight back. So my conclusion is that communication. Let's have a crisis communication plan. Just like we did during COVID, we ought to be communicating. Otherwise, the market will feed on noise. People would, from January to March, when we are not signed on to the IMF program, people will start feeding on noise. And if we are not careful, we will have the kind of depreciation we witness. We will have the kind of price increases, the hoarding, and all kinds of rational or irrational behavior that we recorded in the last 3 months of 2023. Thank you.
I'll be coming back to what is the alternative for this debt exchange program, because there's been talk about some are saying that governments will cut down on expenditure. How would that feed into this debt exchange program? We've had some comments on WhatsApp, and if I can have these comments as we share with our viewers in terms of 2022 business review and what the viewers out there are saying with respect to their comments on WhatsApp. So we can have those comments on our screens, and as we'll be reading them to you. Abochi Philip from Keta constituency says, good afternoon, all your listeners and viewers as well. I feel worried if government officials are using Ukraine and the Russian war. E-levy is not the solution to Ghana's problem. What we are seeing now, it will have an effect in 2023. The hardship is too much for Ghana. I salute Martin Kokose, that is at Joy FM area. I hope I got the name right, please. And another one is coming from Sunny, says that 2022 is not only a very tall challenge to corporate world, but to individuals as well. How to feed is more than a running business issue. And that is coming from Sony. That's when another one is coming from Agbesi Peter Kaji. I hope I got it right. Said nothing good should be expected in 2023. Now that even negotiating on salary-based pay is not seeing any light, coming from Agbesi Peter Kaji. And this one is also saying, I personally expect inflation to stabilize going forward in the short term. Investment is more stable. Investment now and going forward. Please add your name and where you send us the message from. There is another one that's coming from. My worry is that the rate at which we print and reprint CD, can we have a particular print that will stand the test? So that would be difficult because there is always reissue when it comes to currencies. And the Bank of Ghana always tell us that they look at the cost of printing new notes and then reissuing them. So it's not necessarily a whole new cost. That's what the Bank of Ghana says. This one says that all these contribute to the devaluation. And also Bank of Ghana should have known that the cedi is a note and the pesos are coins. Why are they printing 1 and 2 Ghana cedi notes? Please add your name. Another one says that I pray that 2023 government will build industries or expand some of the old ones and export its products and earn US dollars. Please add your name and where it's coming from. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Join news says customers of Gold Coast Money Market Funds Limited are still not refunded since the past 2 years, and counting, from Paul K. and Fancyman and David from, is it Charlotte in US or what? I don't know, maybe here. It says that ask your guests their thoughts on the West African Customs Union. Without it, we can't industrialize. And I'll be coming to Professor Peter Kote, because there are some who have argued that this whole thing about waiving this customs charge, there's the WTO agreement and there's World Customs Union agreement, and it's not even in government discretion to say that they are reviewing this cost of importing and all the rest. And Prof, can you help us in that area about the space that we have as a country to review some of these port charges and levies as well, Prof?
Can be reviewed. I mean, we've heard the operators in the industry speak about the way some charge in dollars, and it doesn't help. You see, we fix some of these rates in US dollars, and some collect them in US dollars, or they peg at the prevailing exchange rate. Why couldn't we fix these rates for a period, let's say 6 months or 3 months, so that it makes importation and tax payments and payments of levies more stable, more planned than we are currently doing? It appears that there's little regulation regulating the whole architecture. So you find many operators basically doing as they please. Of course, there are some standard ones that one cannot touch, but there are others that can be touched. And I believe most of the operators will tell you, more especially the way we charge in USD, and that brings a lot of pressure on the exchange rate. It brings a lot of pressure on importers. We are told that even demurrage, if you import currently, within a short space of time, you start attracting demurrage. So it puts pressure on importers to quickly find money and import. I'm yet to be confirmed, but we are told initially it was a month. Now you're giving about a week or so. Otherwise, demurrage will kick in. And these are all things that makes importation expensive. It makes the charges add to the cost of imports. But having said that, I think we also have to be mindful. We import too much. We import virtually everything into this country. I like Bank of Ghana's move to restrict the supply of dollars to certain commodities to be imported. But of course, the issue of rice I have raised, that we ought to be careful. We don't have self-sufficiency in rice. But I believe we ought to be careful with the charges and streamline some of these charges at the ports. Again, this depends on engaging the stakeholders. They have a lot to tell you. When they engage you bilaterally, there's so much they can tell you. And some of us pick some of this feedback from the industry. And I believe government should do the same.
Mr. Waji, 2023, the Ghana cedi will still be an issue that might linger on. Some are saying that, well, we've seen some marginal stability. There is pressure again. The IMF program might be the savior. EIU has done its own forecast for the cedi, and it's not looking good. Some are saying that, stop talking down on the cedi. But the reality is that if the cedi is stable, nobody will be talking down on the cedi, if I can use that expression. People will not be gravitating towards dollars, doing things and all that. For you, how do you see things for us as a business person in terms of the cedi's performance going into next year?
Well, we are hoping that the stability that we have enjoyed will be sustained in 2023. But that will require that certain things must be done. And one of them is the IMF money coming in. If it comes on time, at least it will bring the confidence, and people that ordinarily will now convert even their cedi into dollar to save them because of the cedi losing the value will stop. But if you don't get it on time, of course, the cedi will depreciate. And then the fundamentals that we have been talking about. For me, IMF's money or support is for a certain purpose. And that is very temporary.
But now some will describe it that we are virtually drowning in a quicksand. So we need that quick stability right now.
We need it.
Before we could talk about those structural reforms, which I understand is part of this IMF program, that if some of these principles and reforms are followed, it was supposed to correct some of these things that are taking us back to the fund. If you see the program details, all these reforms are in.
Exactly.
It appears that sometimes those who are managing the economy manage to meander their way around, look for waivers and all those things and get the influence. And when it's time to implement them, they dodge those things.
George, exactly this the point. If you go back to history, from when we had independence up to this time,
17 times IMF program.
The reasons why we go for IMF money, the reasons have not changed. It's the same reason. Deficit, excessive borrowing, mismanagement, the same reason. It's the same reason that we are facing now. I think it's about time we stop and start thinking about how we can work this thing out so that we don't go back to IMF. Otherwise, continuously, the cedi will depreciate. If you continue to import the way we are importing, if we decide not to export, because we are not exporting because we don't have the product to export. What are we exporting? We are exporting
that there are a lot of
the same cocoa in the raw form, gold in the raw form, and all those.
You're exporting nurses, you're exporting doctors, services.
You see, if you need money to change the structure of the economy, it's not the nurses that we are exporting. It's exporting huge quantity of value-added products. That is what we've not been able to do. We've paid lip services to the changing the structure of the economy, and I think that is definitely not helping us, and we have to change. Go and check the private sector development strategy, 1 and 2. If you have implemented just 30%, I'm not saying 50, just 30%, the conversation would have been different. Good report, good proposal, good policy, implementation is poor. Once we get the stability, we get the money, and then the cedi stabilizes, inflation is coming down, we go to sleep. And now we boast that we have changed the economy is doing well. But the fundamentals is weak. The economy is weak. Any shock, just as we had for the past 3 years, would destabilize everything. So for me, the IMF is good, it's the only way out, but it's not a panacea to our problems. The problem there is changing the structure of the economy. Now, we cannot do that by the way we are managing the private sector. If you look at the 7-point agenda, I have issue with it. There are conflicting agendas within the 7-point agenda. The first one says that aggressively we are going to mobilize revenue from the domestic market. Now, the second one is saying that you are going to boost local capacity and local production. Who is going to do that? It's the private sector. You are increasing taxes. The cost of production is going up. Now, the policy rate that we have, 27%, is just 0.5% short of the highest we have had in Ghana. That is 2003. If anything should happen, we'll go further, and that feeds into the cost of credit and the cost of production. So you want to boost local production, you want to add value. Meanwhile, you are taxing the private sector out of business. How do you do that? The cost of production is high. Ghanaian businesses are not competitive. If you want to export, you must be competitive. Otherwise, nobody will buy your products. Now that we have signed on to the African Continental Free Trade Area, we have all other trade agreements. If any Ghanaian would want to export, the product must be competitive. Our cost of production is very high, and businesses in Ghana are not competitive. Electricity, if you want to...
Tariffs are going up first quarter next year?
Yes, the manufacturing...
I prepared for that one.
That will be deadly for now.
You have no choice. How are you going to manage the situation?
That is why we've been doing all this while. We've been managing the situation. That is why the economy continuously is getting weaker and weaker. In fact, the path to industrialization, for me, is going to be a bitter one. It's going to require a certain level of commitment, but the end result will be in the best interest of all of us.
But how do we draw the line? And understand the concerns about businesses being stressed and under pressure, but also this question about realistic tariffs as well. Someone has to pay. years of subsidizing has brought us to where we are.
Yes.
How do we do? Because now it is going to go up. Do you think that, how should we get around it?
In other jurisdictions that have a clear path for industrialization, there is subsidy for industries. Ghana, it was the reverse. The industries were subsidizing the household. It was quite recently that they have reversed. Even within the West African sub-region here, industries, the household were subsidizing industries, but we were rather subsidizing industry. If you want to industrialize, the other countries, the cost per kilowatt for a manufacturing company is less than 5 cents. We are paying about 12 cents. And definitely you cannot be competitive under such circumstances. So let's look at, if you really want to industrialize, what is it that you have to do? Policy credibility is key. You don't want to industrialize where you make imports less expensive and make local production more expensive. And that will not help us. Let's look at our policies, do proper research. This thing is being done all over. I mean, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Go to the other countries that have changed their structure from an import-led to an export-led. The Koreans, the Chinese, the Indians, they have done it, and we can learn from them. And they came out with specific steps, policies to be able to change the structure, and they have achieved it. In fact, the major beneficiaries of trade are not the exporters of raw materials. They are the exporters of value-added goods. So if you want to benefit from trade, then you have to add value to our raw materials. Why is it that still we export our cocoa in its raw form? Yes, our gold in the raw form. And somebody has set up a chocolate manufacturing company in UK, calling it Ghana Cocoa Chocolate Manufacturing. The name Ghana attached to that chocolate
alone, premium brand,
gives it a premium and is getting money. The chocolate industry, the last time I checked, is over $100 billion. Those that are exporting the raw cocoa, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, are getting just about $3 billion. The money, huge sums of it, goes to those that are adding value. These are lessons for us. Why are we sitting down? We can do it. Let's do it. It will not be easy, but once we put our hands on it, our heart to it, and say that for this period, that is what we are doing, it will help us. We started with one district, one factory. For me, we don't have to set up a factory in every district. Let's look at the factories or the goods, the product that we are competitive at producing and exporting, and concentrate on those products instead of setting up factories all over. The Ministry of Trade has a 10-point agenda, and these products, they have both backward and forward linkages. If you're able to concentrate just on these 10 products and say that for now, the companies that are already in that space, we are going to support you to produce at a lower cost, be competitive and export. We will change the structure of
Let me bring in Dr. Samankra. And you, in your earlier submission, you spoke about the uncertainty going into 2023. Closing an IMF board approval, let me use the word cerebus paribus, or all other things being equal. Does it bring some confidence to you as a businessman, as an investor, engaging all these partners outside the country, and some certainty going forward?
Well, I mean, it's better than nothing. One could highlight from that would be if the debt restructuring deal has been reached with all these debtors, that means our credit rating would somehow be held in the process, and that the country's credit rating would not go to a default. In that case, if it's held or moved up, local businesses stand an advantage of going back to the capital markets to be able to raise money for their various businesses. The other side is if we're not able to reach this agreement and IMF is not signed, then obviously, as you know, we're bankrupt. Our credit rating will be a D, which is a default, and that is seriously going to have a dire consequence on businesses and our economy at large. Now, just going back to the discussion we're having on taxes, I don't think the issue is just increasing taxes. It's making sure the tax net has been expanded and the existing tax portfolios are being done effectively and efficiently. Let's go on exercise duty. Which country in 2022 is using band roads as a means of curbing contraband goods? In developed world, everywhere, people have moved on to a highly sophisticated digital encrypted codes that is not what you call it visible by the eye and can only be seen by auditing tools. And if you look at Brazil's issue, or even in Turkey, just announcement of the implementation of such a system increase their tax to about 30-40%, because a lot of these evasion goes through these pockets. We have porous borders. So to use band roads as a means of curbing contraband goods, I still don't get it. So the issue is not targeting and increasing taxes on the existing people that are paying, but is to expand it, research, and look into avenues that would help you to raise a lot more revenue on the existing portfolios. The portfolios we have in place are good enough to raise reasonable taxes, but the structures in place in collecting this revenue is where there's a problem. So we need to look at it and address the situation head on that. So these are the things that we need to look at. Like I keep repeating myself, we need to be very, very, very consultative in our approach. We need to bring all hands on deck. We can't run a country like ours, which is an economic showpiece, on a narrow-minded route. It has to be broad spectrum, and Ghana has a lot of resources. Look at the people that you have on your show. So we need to make use of the resources, the human capital, bring the knowledge, the people with the knowledge on the table, and address these issues one after the other. This is the only way we need transparency. You were talking about a debt restructuring. People are agitating because they don't see transparency. You are telling individual bondholders to have a haircut. Meanwhile, the government size remain the same. You are saying you've cut government, expenditure or by 30%. Where? Show. Let there be clear transparency. When people see this transparency and it reflects on the market, I can guarantee you people will buy into this policy. But whereby people have their own reservation and they know there's a serious disconnect between what government says and what government actually do, then you run into these challenges and difficulties. So I think going forward, there has to be a transparent system where people can see exactly where we are, what we are doing to recover ourselves. And look, we are all Ghanaians. Everybody's going to support and participate and help to come out of this hole. But not to give that kind of a transparency and not people seeing exactly what is going on. Anything that you bring out, people are going to fight against it because it's instant and it's based on previous experiences or precedences where there was a total disconnect between what government says and what they actually do. So these are the areas that we're talking about. I'm talking about communication, but I would say stability. Without stability in the market, we can't do anything. You cannot plan. As a consumer, you target to buy something 10 cedis. You go there the next day, it's 20 cedis. You can't buy. Businesses can't work. Individuals can't function. So I believe stability in the market should be the number one priority. And everything that would help us to stabilize the market, in addition to the IMF, needs to be looked into critically, researched, and implemented. Because that's the only way out of this economic corridor that we find ourselves.
Prof. Peter Korte, let me bring Prof. Peter Korte and two quick things. One, the bit about the alternatives. How would the government expenditure cut thing contribute to this whole debt exchange program thing? Because we have to reach an agreement as well with the IMF. They talk about government cutting down projects size and all the rest. Help me out how that feed into this whole DSA thing going forward. And also, is government underestimating the threat to this economy in terms of how this debt exchange program is being handled? Because for the next 2, 3 years, 5 years, we might be close to the international market. We might struggle to raise funds on the international market. Our only option in financing the deficit and even raising revenue is local. Now, I meet people who are bitter and are mad at what is going on. They don't want to buy anything to do with bonds again. Where are they going to invest their monies? There's something that people don't want us to talk about. Some people are saying that they are going for dollars. It has implication on the Ghana cedi as well. Let's first deal with the real threats of how this DSAF is not handled well and its impact on the economy, and then the alternative, please.
Yes, so with government expenditure cuts, the first thing it does is sends a signal to the citizens. You are asking people to tighten their belt. You are asking people to sacrifice. You are asking people to undergo a haircut, forgo interest income. I told you there are some who depend, the vulnerable, people who depend on this for their daily livelihood, for their health expenditures, etc. So if you are asking for such a painful sacrifice, which is inevitable because of where we find ourselves, then you also have to show the goodwill. So I expect government to also cut expenditure in certain areas. There are some areas that you cannot touch, but the size of government continues to haunt us. We need to see a signal in terms of the number of ministers, deputy ministers. Some are spoken about is gratia. The list is so tall. There's a lot of savings you can make from, and there are several areas that we can make savings from. But more importantly, rationalizing expenditure, getting value for money for government spending. If you pick the Auditor General's report, you will find how wasteful we are as a country, not just government, but also the citizens, the managers, other leaders within the various sectors. So that should be one of the focal areas. That if you want people to sacrifice, then government has to show the goodwill. Okay. There has to be leadership by example. And then also the second area that will help is capital expenditure. Because as citizens, we always say no electricity, no vote, no road, no votes. So there's a lot of expectation from government, despite the fact that we are in crisis. People still demand certain services. Their roads have to be fixed, electricity has to be, we need water, we need oil, and you ought to be circumspect in all of this. Otherwise, the demand for you to satisfy your citizens so that they vote for you will then outweigh the focus or the need to ensure that you cut down on expenditure. So I'm not surprised our expenditure is going to increase by 39.5% in 2023 as budgeted. Government is underestimating this, the effects. Let's look at the financial system. There have been a lot of stress tests that all the financial institutions, especially the banks, have done, which they are sharing with government to see the extent to which they will be affected and how to minimize some of this effect. That is why we are even told that some donors, bilaterals, have even given money into this fund.
Stability.
Yeah, so any institution that may be undergoing or will go under any distress can be supported. So government is doing something to avert a possible collapse of a bank or a financial institution. However, I must say, we are not doing much when it comes to individuals. Initially, private bondholders were going to be excluded, but because Labour opted out, they were not consulted appropriately, in my view. So they opted out. We have to bring in private bondholders. And a number of such people are within the vulnerable category. A lot of them are pensioners who have invested their pension funds. They bilaterally, individually invested their pension funds or savings over the past into these funds and living on the returns. So if you are including them, it means some are going to perhaps suffer more in terms of health because they cannot afford their blood pressure medication, they cannot go for hospital checks, they cannot feed appropriately, their nutrition standards will be affected. So that is an area that I think government ought to look at. I mentioned about PAMSCAD when we had a structural adjustment program, people that were affected. There were some PAMSCAD that support that were given to them. Unfortunately, we haven't heard about private or individual bondholders. So that is an area we need to look at. Otherwise, we are going to affect many people, many institutions, especially the private financial institutions. Some are they're having this mark to market value and all that, and people have lost money already, and especially the vulnerable. We have not looked at that area. And I think government have to consider those areas.
We're supposed to be wrapping up in the next 5 minutes. But Prof, before I get your final thoughts, and I'll do a quick round with all of you as well, in 2023, maybe in a minute or something, what would be the biggest threats to businesses and even the economy that we should watch?
Our biggest threat will be our inability to sign on to the IMF program. That will be the biggest threat in my view. I think the first few months, or the first 2 or 3 months of 2023 is also very, very critical. The way we communicate, the way we feed the market with right information is going to determine whether speculators will handle the market rather than credible government policy. So for me, if we are able to communicate very well, we are able to sign on to the IMF program, then we are likely to see some stability, some respite to our economy, and we'll pick up from from the pieces and be able to accelerate growth come 2024 and beyond.
Prof, let me let you have 30 seconds to wrap up on your final thoughts. 30 seconds.
Yeah, so my final thought is I urge government. I mean, they are working. We know they are working hard to get us out of this, but I think there is a lot of room for improvement. Their communication strategy ought to be more streamlined. We need a crisis communication plan. I haven't heard from the Minister of Communication for a long time, and I'm wondering what is going on. I think we ought to communicate better what our credible economic policies are in the local languages, not just in English, in the local languages, clear languages where the ordinary Ghanaian will understand and appreciate and respond rationally. Otherwise, they will feel a noise and our policies will not yield the needed impact.
Dr. Samankra, in a minute, your final thoughts.
Okay, well, my biggest threat in 2023 is not having the right policy, execution, and implementation. I think we need to make sure that every policy that matters, that we have to execute, has to be well executed and implemented. Over the years, our downfall has been execution. Yes, there's policy, but when it comes to execution, there's a huge disconnect. So my biggest threat is if we don't work on that problem, we're still going to have our challenges, including the currency depreciation. But altogether, my advice to government is very simple. It's very difficult to run an economy. Nobody says it's not. But I believe consultation and collective decision-making is a solution going forward.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor. Mark, the final words, please.
Well, I think we are not out of the woods yet. As businesses, we are cautiously optimistic that 2023 will be relatively better. But I also think that economic activity will be slow in 2023. Even from the budget, GDP grows about 2.8%, which sends a signal that other activities will be slow. But I think that when we work together, we can overcome these challenges. And the private sector, of course, the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we are ready to work with government and everybody to ensure that we change the structure of the economy. We are going to embark on an advocacy on industrialization in the midst of all these difficulties so that we bring all stakeholders together. Let's jaw and see how we can export more and import less, change the structure of the economy, stabilize our currency, and then bring total stability into the economic environment. Businesses operate in certain environment, and that environment is stability in the macroeconomic variables. Inflation is coming down, the cedi being strong, policy rates coming down, interest rates are down, and that will send a right signal for people, the businesses, to now move on to invest more into the private sector.
Mr. Magbedu Abuaji, Chief Executive, Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Professor Peter Korte, he's an economist and director of ISE. Makobla is executive director, Synergy Ghana. That is Dr. Sam Ankra. He's president of the African Investment Group, and also Kena Shibe. And all these wonderful, distinguished guests will join us this afternoon for our 2022 business review, as we also look in 2023. I believe that the debate will still go on in your homes and offices. about what should be expected in 2023. Well, we'll keep our hope alive and hope that things will be good for us in 2023. My name is George Wiafe. Have a good business day, an afternoon, and Happy New Year.